What if you closed your eyes and simply did not wake up in your own room? No sirens outside, no hum from the refrigerator, no thin blue light from a screen left on somewhere down the hall. Instead, warmth on your face, the smell of wet earth and resin, a sound you can't place because nothing in your life has ever made it. 290 million years before you were born, before the first dinosaur, before the first bird, before the first blade of grass. What if you woke up in the Permian period? Before we begin, I'd like to know where you are right now. Leave a comment with the place you're listening from and the time on your clock at this exact moment. You wake up on your side, cheek pressed into mud. That's the first thing. The mud, it's fine and red, almost the color of brick dust, and it has dried into a crust on your arm where you were lying. When you push yourself upright, the crust cracks and falls away in flakes. Underneath, your skin is stained rust orange. That stain is going to be with you for a while. The soil here is loaded with iron, oxidized by long dry seasons and long wet ones, and it will one day harden into the layers geologists call the red beds of Texas, though the word Texas means nothing yet and won't for a very long time. You sit up slowly, nothing hurts. That's almost stranger than the mud. The light is wrong, not the color of it. The sun overhead is the same sun, a little younger and a little dimmer, but you'd never notice the difference. What's wrong is the quality of the air it's shining through. It's thick, humid, yes, but more than that, heavy. The way air feels in a greenhouse at midday, and when you take your first real breath, something odd happens. It's too easy. Your chest fills, and there's still more coming, like a glass that won't stop pouring. Some models of ancient atmospheres suggest that around this time the air held noticeably more oxygen than it does today. Perhaps a quarter of every breath, maybe more, against the 21% you're used to. The estimates argue with each other, as good estimates do, but stand here, breathing it, and the argument feels academic. You feel like you could run. You won't need to run for another few minutes. Enjoy them. The second thing you notice is the silence. Not true silence. There's wind, and it's moving through something above and behind you with a dry hiss, a sound like sand being poured. You turn to look. Trees, tall, straight, dark green, needled, crowding a low ridge about 200 meters off. They are early conifers, the ancestors of every pine and spruce and cedar you've ever walked past without thinking about. Wind in conifers doesn't rustle. It sighs. There are no broad, flat leaves here to clatter against each other. Broadleaf trees haven't been invented. Neither has birdsong. That's the absence you're actually hearing, though you can't name it yet. There is no chirping, no cawing, no warbling from the tree line, no distant crow, no dawn chorus, because there are no birds anywhere on this planet, and there won't be for another 140 million years. There's no barking, no lowing, no rustle of something warm-blooded in the undergrowth, no frogs either. Nothing is calling out to anything. Instead, there is a low, dry, ticking sort of buzz coming from everywhere at once, rising and falling. Insects. Enormous numbers of them. And here's a detail paleontologists genuinely love. In many Permian fossil beds, roughly 9 out of every 10 insect fossils recovered are roach-like. Not the roaches in your kitchen, exactly. A related, older lineage, but close enough that the picture is fair. This is, in a very real sense, the age of the cockroach. They are in the leaf litter, in the rotting wood, under every stone. If you're the sort of person who dislikes them, I'm sorry. You're outnumbered by something like 1,000,000,000,000 to 1. You stand up, the ground under your bare feet, and yes, you're barefoot, because the universe has a sense of humor, is not what you expect. There's no lawn, no turf, no soft mat of grass to cushion anything. Grass will not appear on Earth for another 230 million years, and its absence changes everything about how the world looks. Between the plants, there is simply bare dirt, open, cracked, exposed. Vegetation grows in clumps and stands, in thickets and gallery forests along water, and everywhere else the planet is naked. Near your feet, low ferns and horsetails. The horsetails are jointed and ribbed like green bamboo, some of them taller than you, and if you snap one, it will be full of water and gritty with silica. Further out, seed ferns spread palm-like fronds. Club mosses, the shrunken descendants of the great coal forests, cluster where the ground stays wet, and there is no color anywhere except green and brown, and that rust red. No flowers, not one, not anywhere on Earth. No yellow, no violet, no pink, no white petals. No fruit, no berries, no nectar, no bees. Bees will arrive with the flowers, tens of millions of years later, as part of the same deal. The Permian world is beautiful, but it is beautiful in the way a fern is beautiful. Green, geometric, and completely uninterested in advertising itself. Let me give you a sense of where you actually are in time, because it's easy to underestimate. You are not in the age of dinosaurs. You are not near the age of dinosaurs. The very first dinosaurs will not appear for about 60 million years after this morning. To put that in a shape you can hold, Tyrannosaurus rex died out 66 million years before your alarm clock. So standing here in this mud, the first dinosaur is almost as far ahead of you in time as T-Rex is behind you. You have arrived early, absurdly early. There is one supercontinent. Almost all the land on Earth has collided into a single mass, and you are near its western edge, close to the equator. There is no Atlantic Ocean. You could, in principle, walk from here to what will become Morocco, or Siberia, or Antarctica, without ever crossing salt water. It would only take you the rest of your life. Even the days are shorter. The moon has been slowly stealing Earth's spin for 4 billion years. And back here, the planet turns a little faster. The day you have just woken into is roughly 22.5 hours long. You are, by about 90 minutes, behind schedule. You start walking toward the sound of water because you're thirsty, and because that is what every animal here does. The channel is shallow and wide, and the color of milky tea braided across the floodplain in ribbons. As you get close, something small breaks from cover and skitters over the mud. A lizard-shaped animal about the length of your forearm, low-slung, quick, with a wide, blunt head. It isn't a lizard. Lizards don't exist. It's a captor-hinid, one of the small reptiles that swarm this landscape the way rats and mice swarm ours, and it has a mouthful of teeth arranged in multiple rows like a rasp for grinding through tough plants and hard-shelled insects. It stops 3 meters away, side on, and looks at you with one flat eye. You are the strangest thing it has ever seen. It has no category for you. No animal here does. Nothing on this planet has ever encountered a tall, upright, 2-legged, hairless creature that stands still and stares, and for a little while, a very little while, that confusion is the only protection you have. The captor Henid decides you're not food and not a threat, and vanishes into the horsetails. You kneel at the water's edge, cup your hands, drink, It's warm and tastes of silt and metal. And it's while you're kneeling there, face close to the surface, that you notice the shape on the far bank. It has been there the whole time. It hasn't moved because it doesn't need to, and because the morning sun is warming the thing that rises from its back, a tall, translucent fan of skin stretched over bone, glowing faintly red where the light passes through it. It is about as long as a small car, and it has just turned its head. Do not move. That's the instinct, and for once the instinct is right, but not for the reason you think. You freeze because a part of your brain built by 2 million years of predators on the African savanna has just recognized a shape it has never seen and filed it correctly under danger. The animal across the water hasn't recognized anything. That's the point. It's looking at you the way you might look at a piece of furniture in a dark room, waiting for it to resolve into something familiar. When it doesn't, it simply holds still. So you have a moment. Use it to look properly, because you are looking at one of the most famous animals ever to be misunderstood. It is roughly 3 meters from snout to tail tip, longer than you are tall, twice over. Lying flat, it would take up a sofa and then a bit of the floor. If you saw it in a car park, it would stretch from the front bumper of a small hatchback to the rear one, with the tail hanging over. The body is barrel deep. The legs are short and set out sideways in a sprawl, elbows and knees bowed wide so that the belly hangs close to the mud. There's real bulk in the shoulders, somewhere between 2 and 250 kilograms of it, which makes this thing heavier than a large male lion. But nobody remembers the body. Everybody remembers the sail. It rises straight off the spine, a great semicircular fan starting just behind the neck and running most of the length of the back, tallest over the hips. Up close, you can see how it's built. The vertebrae have sent their spines shooting upward, dozens of long bony rods, and skin is stretched between them. Where the morning light comes through, the membrane glows a dull rose red, and you can see the branching lines of blood vessels inside it, dark against the glow, like veins in a leaf held up to a window. It looks deliberate. It looks designed. It is, in fact, one of the oldest arguments in paleontology. For most of the 20th century, the answer was heat. The idea was elegant. A sail is a radiator, pointed at the low morning sun, and you soak up warmth across a huge surface, turn it edge on at noon, and you dump heat instead. One classic calculation from the 1970s suggested that a Dimetrodon of this size could warm itself from a chilly dawn to working temperature in about 80 minutes with the sail, and would need 4 hours or more without it. 4 hours is a long time to be slow in a world full of things that would like to eat you. That explanation is still taught, and it may still be partly true, but the fossils have been arguing with it. When you measure sails across many individuals, they don't grow in proportion to the body. They grow faster. A Dimetrodon twice as long has a sail far more than twice as tall. That's the signature of a display structure, not a thermostat. Radiators scale with need. Billboards scale with ambition. So the honest answer, standing here on the riverbank, is that it might be a heater, and it might be a flag, and it might be both, and that the animal in front of you is not going to explain itself. What it will do is open its mouth, not at you. It yawns, or something like a yawn, and the jaws come apart, and now you can see the second reason this animal matters. The teeth are not all the same. Look at a crocodile, and you see a row of cones, more or less identical, varying only in size. Look into this mouth, and you see a set: small nipping teeth at the front, then two enormous curved daggers set back in the upper jaw, then a run of smaller blades behind. Different teeth, doing different jobs. That's where the name comes from. Dimetrodon. 2 measures of teeth. It sounds like a technicality. It isn't. It's the beginning of something. Every mammal alive, including you, has a mouth organized on that principle. Incisors to cut, canines to grip, molars to grind. Run your tongue along your own teeth right now, and you can feel the specialization. What you're looking at, across a shallow Permian river, is one of the first serious experiments in that idea. And here's the part that undoes most people's mental filing system. This is not a dinosaur. It is not even close to a dinosaur. It's not a reptile in the way a lizard is a reptile. Behind each eye socket, its skull has a single opening in the bone, one hole in a very particular place. And that one hole puts it in a group called the synapsids. You have that hole too. Press your fingers to your temple and clench your jaw. The muscle you feel bulging is passing through the descendant of exactly that opening. Dimetrodon is not an ancestor of yours in a direct line, but it is on your branch. It belongs to the lineage that leads to mammals, which means that this heavy, sprawling, sail-backed animal is a closer relation to you than it is to any dinosaur that will ever live, and the time involved is genuinely difficult to hold in the mind. Dimetrodon vanished from the Earth around 270 million years ago. Tyrannosaurus rex appeared around 68 million years ago. The gap between those two animals is more than 3 times the gap between T-Rex and your kitchen. When we put them together in the same toy box as children, we were being off by an amount of time that would fit the entire age of dinosaurs inside it, with room to spare. Now, practical matters. Let's assess your chances, honestly, because you did wake up here without shoes. In a straight sprint over 10 meters, it wins. Comfortably. Those sprawling limbs are built for a lunge, and the neck muscles anchored to that deep, narrow skull can drive those daggers through hide with real force. Some Dimetrodon species had fine serrations along the tooth edges, among the earliest known in any land predator, the kind of edge that turns a puncture into a wound that keeps opening. Over a kilometer, though, you win. You are a long-distance animal in a world that has not yet invented long-distance animals. Your legs are stacked directly under your body. You sweat across your entire skin, and you can jog until something with a sprawling gait and no sweat glands has to stop and cool down. This is your single genuine advantage in the Permian, and I want you to hold on to it because you are about to have very few others. Your other advantage is that you're new. Predators are conservative. They attack what they've eaten before, which is why what happens next doesn't involve you at all. The animal turns its head away. There's a movement further along the bank, something low and broad shifting in the shallows. An amphibian the size of a large dog that has misjudged how much water it has left as the channel dries. The Dimetrodon doesn't charge. It walks unhurried, the belly swinging, the sail cutting a slow arc against the sky. 20 meters, 10. The amphibian doesn't register the threat until the last 2. Then it's very quick and very quiet. There is no roar. That's the thing that will stay with you. In every film you've ever seen, this moment comes with sound. Here there's a splash, a wet crack, A brief thrashing in reeds, and then nothing but the wind hissing in the conifers again. No vocal cords worth the name, no audience. This animal has been feeding this way for millions of years and has never once needed to announce it. You stay very still until the sail has gone, dragging its meal into the shade. And then, when your hands stop shaking, you look at the water properly for the first time. The brown channel, the reed beds, the still pools left behind by a river that clearly floods and shrinks with the seasons. Something moves under the surface, something wide. You had assumed the danger was on the land. The thing under the surface is not a fish. You back away from the bank, 3 careful steps, and the shape stops where the water shallows. It doesn't want to strand itself. For a second, the silt clears, and you see it properly. A head, an enormous, flat, wide head, close to half a meter across, with the eyes set on top rather than the sides, angled upward. Everything behind it is comparatively modest. It is as though someone built an animal, starting with a shovel, and then lost interest. This is Ariops, and if you want a single image for it, imagine a salamander the size of a large pig that has been stepped on. It's about 2 meters long and might weigh what a grown man weighs, sometimes considerably more. The limbs are short and splayed. The ribs are absurdly thick. The skin is smooth and damp-looking, with rows of small bony plates along the belly for protection against the ground. And the mouth, when it opens, which it does now, slowly, in a kind of threat display, is lined not only along the jaws, but across the roof. There are fangs on the palate, 2 rows of them, sitting where you keep your hard palate, pointing down. They are there because Ariops cannot chew. Nothing here can chew, not properly. Chewing is a mammal trick that hasn't been developed yet. What Ariops does instead is grab and then throw. It clamps down, hauls its head back and up, tosses the prey into the air, and catches it deeper in the throat. Those palatal fangs are there to stop anything sliding back out during the maneuver. Modern crocodiles do a version of the same thing, and if you've ever watched one flip a fish skyward and swallow it whole, you've watched a technique older than the dinosaurs by 100 million years. Your odds here are worth stating plainly. In the water, you lose. It has the mass, the leverage, the ambush position, and no reason to let go. On land, you win easily. You simply walk away. Ariops on dry ground is a heavy, low-slung animal, moving in an ungainly, side-to-side wave, and it is not going to chase anything more than a few meters from the bank. So, the rule you've just learned, standing in Permian mud with your heart going, is the oldest rule on this floodplain. The water is not a refuge. The water is where most of the teeth are. You walk upstream instead. And as you go, you start reading the landscape, because the landscape here is telling a very clear story. The channel is braided. It splits and rejoins around low bars of sand, and the banks are cut in steps, each step marking a level the water once held and then abandoned. There are dead horsetails lying flattened all in one direction, combed by a current that is no longer there. Further from the main channel, you find pools, isolated now, some of them no wider than a kitchen table, their edges cracked into curling plates of dried clay. This world has seasons, and they are violent ones. You are near the equator, on the western edge of a supercontinent, so vast that weather behaves differently on it than anything you have experienced. Enormous landmasses generate enormous monsoons. Air heats over the continental interior, rises and pulls moisture in from the ocean in a great annual inhalation. For part of the year, water comes down in quantities that turn these plains into a sheet of brown flood. For the rest, the sun takes it all back. The rocks that will form here record both. Geologists, reading the Permian red beds, find channel sands stacked on flood deposits, stacked on desiccation cracks, over and over, like a ledger kept by a very consistent accountant. And the animals in those rocks record something else. The moment the ledger closes, there are layers in these beds where fossil skeletons are packed together in numbers that make no ecological sense. Dozens, hundreds. Not a battlefield, not a predator's kill site, a shrinking pool. As the dry season bit down, the water in these floodplain ponds pulled back and back, concentrating everything alive into a smaller and smaller volume until the survivors were lying on each other in a warm soup of their own making, and then the mud closed over the lot. You are looking at one of those pools right now. It just hasn't finished yet. Crouch beside it. The water is barely knee-deep and the color of weak tea, and the surface is broken by hundreds of small ripples because it is crowded. Something surfaces near the middle. It takes you a moment to make sense of what you're seeing. And when you do, you'll want to sit down. The head is shaped like a boomerang. Not metaphorically, the skull flares out into two long horns of solid bone, one to each side, so that the animal's head is far wider than its body and swept backward into points. It's about 1 meter long overall, with a flattened, newt-like body and tiny legs, and it hangs in the water, almost motionless. Only the top of that impossible head breaking the surface, two small eyes staring upward from the flat center of it. This is Diplocalus, and nobody is completely sure why it looks like that. The leading idea is beautifully simple. It's a wing, held at a slight angle into a current. That broad, flat head generates lift, exactly the way an aircraft wing does, letting the animal rise off the bottom with almost no effort at all. Water tunnel tests on model heads support it. In a river system with steady flow, a hydrofoil on your face is not a bad investment. The other idea is more practical still. Try to swallow it. Go on. Imagine you're a 2-meter predator with a mouth like a bear trap, and the animal you have just seized is 1 meter wide and made of bone in exactly the wrong direction. Some Diplocalus fossils show broken and rehealed horn tips, which suggests that this test was run repeatedly in the field. Both explanations might be right. The head could be a wing that became a warning. Move along the pool edge, and you'll find the others. Long, eel-shaped animals with tiny limbs slipping between the reeds. Archaea, 2 meters of patient, needle-toothed hunting, spending its whole life in the water. Small, blotchy temnospondylus in the shallows by the dozen, so abundant in these beds that they turn up in slabs of 100 at a time. Some of them have been found with the bones of their own kind inside their body cavities, which tells you exactly how the dry season resolves disputes. And in the deeper channel, something that will genuinely surprise you: a shark, freshwater, 2 to 3 meters, built like an eel rather than a torpedo, with a long, low dorsal fin running most of its back and a single stout spine projecting from behind the skull like a raised blade. Its teeth are not the triangles you're imagining. Each one is a small base carrying 2 long curved prongs, splayed like a tuning fork, perfect for holding soft, wriggling prey rather than shearing chunks from something large. This is Orthocanthus, and it and its relatives have colonized the rivers and swamps of the Permian world so thoroughly that their teeth are among the most common fossils in some coal swamp deposits. We even know what it ate because we have its droppings, fossil feces from these sharks, come out in a distinctive corkscrew shape, a cast of the spiral valve inside the gut, an intestinal design sharks still use today. And inside some of those spiral coprolites, researchers have found the teeth of juvenile orthocanthus. The adults were eating their own young. It sounds monstrous. It's probably just arithmetic in a nursery swamp where every drying season concentrates the population into shrinking water. The most reliable protein in the neighborhood is your neighbor. Your chances against one of these, for the record, are poor but not hopeless. It is not a great white. It has neither the size nor the bite for a serious go at something your bulk, but it is 3 meters of muscle in murky water where you cannot see your own feet, and it is armed at both ends. You will not be crossing here. Instead, you follow the bank until the channel narrows, and while you're walking, you notice something in the exposed clay of the cut bank that stops you. Holes, vertical, tubular, about as wide as your wrist, running straight down into the sediment. Dozens of them, sectioned open by the erosion, each one ending in a small chamber. Put your hand near one and you'll feel it. Cool air. These are burrows, and the animals that dug them are still in some of them. When the pools vanish, lungfish here do not die. They tunnel down into the mud, seal themselves into a chamber, slow their bodies almost to a stop, and breathe air through a swim bladder that functions as a primitive lung. Then they wait. Weeks, months, however long the sky takes. Paleontologists have found these burrows in Permian rock, with the fish still curled inside, preserved mid-weight, a 290-million-year-old nap that never ended. Their descendants are doing exactly the same thing in Africa and South America right now. Tonight, while you listen to this, you cross at the Narrows, waist-deep, moving fast, hating every second of it. On the far side, you climb the bank, dripping, and realize the light has changed. The sun is low and orange behind the conifer ridge, and the ticking hum that has been the background of your entire day is rising, thickening, layering, turning into something almost mechanical. And then a shadow crosses the water in front of you. Not a bird. There are no birds. Something with 4 wings and a wingspan wider than your outstretched arms. It comes in low over the channel, and for a moment, your brain refuses the information entirely. 4 wings, not 2, beating out of phase. Front pair down while the back pair lifts. So it doesn't flap so much as shimmer. Long body, held straight and rigid. It banks over the reeds, hangs completely still in the air for a second, then slides sideways 20 meters, without ever turning to face the direction it's going. In the low orange light, over open water, it looks as wide as your outstretched arms. It isn't. That's the fear talking, and it's worth correcting, because the truth is remarkable enough without help. The wingspan is around 70 centimeters, about the span of a pigeon, near enough to a small hawk. The body is longer than your forearm, 40-odd centimeters of segmented armor, and the head is mostly eyes. That still makes it the largest insect that has ever existed. Not the largest of its time, the largest full stop across 400 million years of insects. Nothing before it, and nothing since, has come close. Its name is Meganeuropsis, and it is not a dragonfly. It looks like one because the design works and evolution keeps returning to it. But the fine architecture of the wing veins is different. This belongs to an older order that paleontologists call the griffin flies, cousins of dragonflies rather than ancestors, running their own parallel experiment in aerial predation. And it is a predator. Absolutely. Those eyes wrap almost entirely around the head. There is essentially nothing behind it that it cannot see. The legs fold forward into a spined basket that closes around prey in flight. It is hunting the other insects rising off the water in the evening, and in all likelihood, the occasional small vertebrate, something the size of that little captor hinid you met this morning, would not be safe. Something the size of you is entirely safe. In case you were wondering, it has no interest in you and no equipment for you. Your only real risk is walking face first into one in poor light, which would be memorable for both parties. So, why is it so big? The honest answer is that we have two good explanations, and they may both be doing work. The first is the air. Insects don't have lungs. They don't have blood that carries oxygen. What they have is a network of tiny tubes, tracheae, that open along the sides of the body and branch inward, finer and finer, until they deliver oxygen directly to the tissue. It's an elegant system with one hard limit. It depends heavily on diffusion, and diffusion doesn't scale. Double the size of the animal, and the tubes have to work over a distance that punishes them. That ceiling is a large part of why the biggest insect in your world is a beetle you could hold in your palm. Now raise the oxygen content of the atmosphere. Every breath of that air pushes gas further down those tubes before it runs out of pressure. Raise the ceiling, and something can grow into the space. And the Permian air, especially early on, was rich. Estimates vary, and geochemists argue about the exact figures, but the models generally agree that oxygen peaked somewhere in the late Carboniferous and early Permian at levels well above today's 21%, perhaps 30%, possibly more. Laboratory work supports the connection. Raise insects for generations in oxygen-enriched air, and in several species, they get bigger. The second explanation is emptier and stranger. The sky is uncontested. There are no birds, no bats, no pterosaurs. Those are 100 million years away. Nothing else flies. In your world, an insect that grows large and slow gets eaten by something with feathers, and so the whole class has been shaped by relentless pressure toward being small, fast, and evasive. Here there is no such pressure. The griffinflies are the air force. They are also the entire air. That combination, thick oxygen, empty sky, produced a window, and Meganeuropsis is what came through it. The window is already closing, though you'd never know it standing here. Oxygen levels are drifting downward across the Permian, and the giants are going with them. The great coal swamps of the previous period, dense and humid and endless, have been breaking apart for millions of years. Arthropleura, the millipede that grew to 2.5 meters, the largest land invertebrate ever to walk, is gone, or nearly. Its world dried out from under it. You have arrived at the end of the age of enormous arthropods, not the middle of it. The rich air comes with one other consequence, and you'll smell it before you see it. Burning. At elevated oxygen, fire behaves differently. Wood ignites more readily, damp vegetation burns that would otherwise refuse, and flames spread faster and hotter. It's one of the more reliable fingerprints of high oxygen periods in the rock record. Charcoal, layer after layer of it, fossil evidence of a world that caught fire constantly. Look at the ridge to the north, and you can see a haze in the last of the light, a thin brown smear above the tree line where lightning found something dry 3 days ago and is still working through it. Nothing here fights fires. Nothing here is even especially frightened of them. Fire is simply a season, like flood. The light goes quickly. You find a slope of bare sandstone above the flood line. Put your back against a boulder that has held the day's heat and watch the world change shift. The sound is the first thing. That ticking hum you've heard all day thickens into layers, pulses, rasps, a dry sawing noise from the thickets. Under a flat stone near your hand, there are small, hard-shelled things going about their business. Some of the earliest true beetles on Earth, wing cases already closed over the body like a lid, a design so successful that it will eventually account for 1 in every 4 species of animal alive. They are the size of a grain of rice. They have all the time in the world. Something bigger clambers up a horsetail stem, a broad, flattened insect with a long piercing beak folded under its head, built to stab into the reproductive parts of plants and drink. Its group will be extinct before the Permian ends. Right now, it's simply having dinner. Whether any of them are actually making noise on purpose is one of the smaller, lovelier, open questions in paleontology. Fossil insects from the late Permian have been found with ridged structures on the wings that look very much like the stridulating files that crickets use to sing. If that reading is right, somewhere in this period is the first deliberate sound ever produced by an animal for another animal to hear. The first song, in a world with no ears, worth the name to appreciate it. Then you look up, and everything else stops mattering for a while. There is no light pollution. There has never been light pollution. There is no dust from agriculture, no aircraft, no satellites, no glow on any horizon in any direction. The sky above this floodplain is as dark as sky gets, and the Milky Way comes across it like something spilled. Not the faint gray smudge you've maybe glimpsed on holiday, but a structured band, bright enough to cast the faintest shadow, with dark lanes of dust cutting through it in shapes you can trace with a finger, and not one constellation is familiar. Not one, not a single star pattern you have ever learned. This isn't because the stars have moved a little, it's because the sun has been traveling. Our star orbits the center of the galaxy roughly once every 230 million years or so. A galactic year. Since the night you're looking at now, the solar system has completed a full circuit and started another. The neighborhood is entirely different. Some of the stars overhead here will have died before humans exist. Some of the ones you know from your own sky haven't been born yet. The moon, when it rises, looks fractionally larger than it should. It is closer by a few thousand kilometers, still slowly spiraling outward as it drags at the oceans and steals Earth's spin. You would not notice the difference without a photograph to compare, but it's there, and it's part of why this day is only 22 and a half hours long. The cold arrives faster than you'd like. Continental interiors don't hold heat. Without ocean nearby to buffer the swing, the ground gives back everything it absorbed, and the temperature drops hard after dark. You pull your knees up. The stone at your back stays warm for perhaps 2 hours, and then it doesn't. Nothing howls. Nothing calls in the dark. There are no wolves, no owls, no monkeys screaming in the trees, no mosquitoes at your ear. Mosquitoes are 150 million years away. Just the insects, the wind in the conifers, and the occasional heavy slap of something turning over in the water below. You do not sleep well. Nobody would. And when the sky finally goes gray again, you get up stiff and cold and walk to the edge of the slope to look at the plain, and you see them, tracks, deep ones, pressed into the flat mud where the flood left it smooth, coming out of the reeds and heading west, away from the water, into the dry. The stride is enormous. The front prints are set wide, splayed out sideways, and whatever made them was carrying something heavy enough to sink a hand's depth into firm ground. You follow them west because tracks in a landscape like this are a map to water and food, and because you have no better idea. The prints are strange. The front feet are enormous and turned outward, the toes splayed wide with blunt claw marks at the tips. The hind feet are narrower and land almost inside the line of the front. Whatever made these was walking with its elbows out and its belly low, rolling side to side, and it was in no hurry at all. The spacing between prints is short. This animal has never once needed to run. The land changes as you walk, and it changes faster than you expect. By mid-morning, the horsetails have thinned out and given up. The seed ferns go next, retreating into low channels where the water table still reaches them, so that the greenery draws itself down into narrow ribbons along the dry water courses, and the ground between them opens out bare and pale and hard. The conifers persist longest, small, tough, dark trees with narrow needles and thick waxy skins, standing in loose stands on the higher ground. Those trees are worth a moment because they are one of the great quiet revolutions of this period. Needles lose far less water than broadleaves. Seeds survive drought in a way that fern spores cannot. For hundreds of millions of years, plants had been tied to moisture, and the great forests had grown only where the ground was wet. These conifers are the first plants to make a serious attempt on the dry uplands, and the fossil record of this age preserves something almost never seen before: an upland flora, vegetation on hills, trees on ground that isn't a swamp. They also cast the worst shade you have ever tried to sit in. A needle canopy stops maybe half the sun. You'll take it. By midday, you understand the problem with this continent. Almost all the land on Earth has assembled into one mass, and you are near its western coast. But near is doing heavy lifting. Inland, the distances are unlike anything in your world. There is no Mediterranean, no Gulf, no inland sea to soften the air. In the deep interior of a supercontinent, a place can sit thousands of kilometers from any ocean in every direction, and moisture simply does not reach it. What that produces is heat of a kind that doesn't exist on modern continents. Summer temperatures in equatorial Pangaea's interior are thought to have run past 40 degrees routinely, and in places well beyond. The rock record backs it up in the plainest way possible: salt, enormous deposits of it, and gypsum with it, thousands of cubic kilometers of evaporate, laid down as shallow seas and lakes boiled dry. Again and again, the Permian Basin, the rocks that will one day make West Texas rich in oil, is built in part on that patient, colossal evaporation. And there are deserts, real ones, with dunes. You reach the edge of one in the early afternoon, a sea of pale sand running to the horizon, wind-combed into long ridges, the slip faces smooth and unmarked. In the far future, this kind of dune field will harden into cross-bedded sandstone and be sliced open by a river, and people will stand on a canyon rim in Arizona and look at a cream-colored band in the wall and know they are looking at a Permian desert. The remarkable thing about those beds is that they contain almost no bones. What they contain instead is footprints, thousands of them, small tetrapods crossing the dunes. And curiously, most of the well-preserved trackways run uphill. Paleontologists have argued about that for decades. Perhaps damp sand on the shaded upslope held a print better. Perhaps the animals moved at particular times of day. It's a small mystery, still open, and it is the closest thing this desert has to a fossil record. Not the creatures, just the fact that they kept walking. You do not cross the dunes. You are not equipped to cross the dunes. You skirt the edge, and about an hour later, the tracks you've been following bring you to what they were always going to bring you to. Green, a long crooked line of it, following a channel cut into the flat. And inside that line, water, and around the water, animals. The first are sail-backed, and for one bad moment, you think you've walked into a gathering of yesterday's predator. But these are wrong in the details. The sail is taller relative to the body, and it isn't smooth. Each of those long, bony rods carries short crossbars sticking out sideways, so the whole structure looks less like a fan and more like the ribs of some strange rigging. The head is tiny, absurdly tiny, a small blunt wedge on the end of a thick neck attached to a body shaped like a barrel. Edaphosaurus, 3 meters long, 300 kilos or so, and entirely uninterested in meat. That tiny head is the giveaway. It doesn't need jaw power, it needs volume. Open the mouth, and you'd find something genuinely odd. The palate and the inner surface of the lower jaw are paved with dense clusters of small, blunt teeth, grinding plates set well back inside the mouth, mashing plant material against each other before it goes down, not chewing as you do it, but the same problem, solved crudely and early. The body is where the real work happens. Plants are difficult food. Cellulose has to be fermented by microbes over long hours, and fermentation needs a tank. That barrel shape is a tank. Nearly every large plant eater in Earth's history, from these animals to the sauropods to a cow standing in a field tonight, has ended up with the same silhouette for the same reason: an enormous gut and a small head bolted onto the front of it. Nobody knows what the crossbars on the sail were for. Stiffening, maybe. Display, probably. Heat exchange, possibly, with a broader surface area than Dimetrodon's smooth version. There are Edaphosaurus specimens with healed fractures in those spines, which suggests they were used for something more contact-heavy than looking pretty. Nearer the water, something squatter is feeding in the low growth. A heavy-bodied animal, about your height and length, with a broad head and, when it turns, a set of teeth that will stop you, chisel-like at the front, for cropping, broad and blunt along the cheeks, for grinding, differentiated, specialized, mammal-like in principle, in an animal that isn't quite a reptile and isn't quite an amphibian, sitting right at the boundary where full life on land was being negotiated. This is Diadectes, and it is among the first large land vertebrates on Earth ever to make a living by eating plants. That sentence deserves to land properly. For most of the history of life on land, backboned animals ate insects or each other. The plants sat there, unbothered, a vast standing bank of unused energy. The Permian is when that changes at scale. When the food pyramid finally acquires a wide green base and the world begins to work the way you instinctively expect a world to work. Many eaters of plants, fewer eaters of eaters. Then the reeds 40 meters off move and keep moving, and something walks out that resets your sense of scale entirely. It is 6 meters long. The body is a vast rounded drum, so wide that the legs seem to have been pushed out to the sides to get around it, and the whole thing moves with a heavy, rocking, unhurried swing. The hands are huge, splayed, tipped with blunt claws, and the head is preposterous. On 6 meters of animal, it's the size of a large dinner plate, a skull you could carry under one arm, on a body heavier than a horse, possibly approaching half a ton. Cotylohynchus, the largest land animal in the world at this moment in Earth's history, and a herbivore built almost entirely as a fermentation vat with legs. The nostrils are large. The bone structure of the limbs has led some researchers to wonder whether it spent a good deal of time in water, hippo fashion, which would help support that bulk and keep it cool. Others argue for a purely land-based life and a lot of digging with those broad-clawed hands. Your odds against it are excellent in the sense that it has no interest in eating you whatsoever. Your odds are also poor in the sense that half a ton of nearsighted plant processor with no reverse gear does not need to intend anything in order to kill you. Do not get between it and water. It will not notice. You drink upstream of everything, fill nothing, because you have nothing to fill, and sit in thin conifer shade, watching a landscape that has, for the first time, started to feel like an ecosystem rather than a hazard. And that is when the wind changes. It has blown from the interior all day, dry, hot, tasting of dust. Now it swings softly and comes from the other direction, and it is carrying something you have not smelled since you arrived here. Moisture. Out on the western horizon, low and flat and blue-black, a line has appeared across the whole width of the sky. Every animal at the waterhole has stopped eating and lifted its head. It takes 2 hours to arrive, and you spend all of them watching it come. The line on the horizon thickens and rises. The light goes strange, a flat brassy yellow. The sun still burning overhead, while the western half of the sky turns to slate. The wind picks up in gusts that push the conifers over and let them back, over and back, and the surface of the waterhole goes from mirror to hammered metal. Then, at the edge of hearing, thunder, not a crack, a long low roll that seems to come from underneath the ground. Everything at the water leaves. The Edaphosaurus move off in a loose file toward the higher ground, sails swaying. The big Cotylohynchus turns its drum of a body with enormous patience and walks the other way, into the reeds. They know something you're about to learn. You get up the slope, find an overhang in the cut bank where the rock leans out, and wedge yourself under it, and the sky opens. It doesn't rain the way it rains in your world. It falls, a solid gray wall of water, sweeping across the plain from west to east, arriving with a hiss that becomes a roar, and the temperature drops 15 degrees in about 90 seconds. Within a minute, you can't see the far bank. Within 5, the bare ground everywhere, all that cracked, sun-hardened mud that has been baking for months, has stopped absorbing anything at all and turned into a sheet of moving brown water 2 centimeters deep, running everywhere at once. This is the Permian monsoon, and it is one of the most extreme weather systems the planet has ever run. The mechanism is simple and enormous. A supercontinent that size heats up over its interior, far beyond what any modern landmass can manage. Hot air rises, Something has to replace it, and what replaces it is ocean air, dragged inland across thousands of kilometers and wrung out when it hits the rising ground. Then the season turns, the interior cools, the whole circulation reverses, and the taps shut off completely for months. Climate models of Pangaea produce this pattern reliably. So does the rock. In the soils of this age, geologists find hard nodules of calcium carbonate formed at a specific depth in the ground, the exact signature of a soil that is soaked and then thoroughly dried. Over and over, year after year, they find clays that swell and shrink until they polish their own internal fracture surfaces smooth. They even find, occasionally, the pockmarks of individual raindrops, preserved in a mud surface that dried before the next flood covered it. Somewhere in the world, a shower that lasted 11 minutes, 290 million years ago, is still on file. The channel below you fills. That's the part worth watching. If you can bear to lean out, the braided trickle you waded across becomes, in perhaps 40 minutes, a brown river carrying whole conifers, rolling them end over end. The pools that were drying vanish under it. Sandbars disappear. The water is loaded with so much sediment that it sounds gritty, an audible grinding under the roar, which is the sound of this floodplain being taken apart upstream and rebuilt down here. Every layer of red rock you have walked on today was laid down in an afternoon like this one. The rain goes on well past dark. You sit under the overhang with water running off the lip in a curtain in front of you, and you are cold and soaked and oddly not unhappy. There is something in the noise of it. It is the first thing in this entire world that has felt familiar. At some point in the small hours, it stops. Not gradually, it simply ends. And what's left is the sound of 100,000 small streams draining off the plain, and drips, and the river working, and a smell so specific and so completely unexpected that it takes you a moment to place it. Wet earth, that warm, mineral green smell that rises when rain hits dry ground. You know that smell. You have known it your whole life. It comes from a compound made by soil bacteria, released when raindrops hit dust and throw microscopic droplets into the air. And those bacteria are ancient, far older than this period, older than the land animals, older than anything with a spine. Of everything you have encountered here, the strangeness of the sky, and the silence and the animals, this is the one thing that is exactly, precisely, unchanged. 290 million years, and rain on dry ground still smells like home. You doze upright against the rock, and when the sky grays, you crawl out into a world that has been replaced. It's green, not the sparse, dusty, defensive green of yesterday. Real green everywhere, and it happened overnight. The low ground-covering plants, the little scaled spike mosses that were curled up brown and crisp and looked thoroughly dead, have taken up water and opened, and now the ground between the trees is carpeted. Fern fronds that were tight brown fists yesterday afternoon are unrolling in front of you slowly enough that you can almost see it happening, and the air is full of movement. The insect have come out in numbers that are difficult to describe. They rise off the flooded ground in clouds when you walk, thousands at a time, catching the low sun. Roach-like things swarming over every wet stem, beetles working the flood debris, and above them, moving through the swarm, 4 or 5 griffin flies at once, banking and stalling and picking targets out of the air with a dry click you can hear from 10 meters away. They have been waiting for this exact morning. Their entire early lives happened underwater. As armored predatory nymphs in the pools, the flood is the trigger, and the swarm is the harvest. Walk down to the flats, and you'll find the water everywhere in sheets, warm and shallow, and no deeper than your ankles, stretching hundreds of meters across ground that was dust yesterday. It's already occupied. There are amphibians in it in extraordinary numbers, and they are breeding. This is the entire reason their year exists. Every temnospondyle on this floodplain has been wading through the dry, buried in mud or crammed into a shrinking pool, and now for a few weeks, there is warm, shallow water across the whole world, and they will spend it doing nothing else. Kneel down, cup your hands in the shallows, and look. Larvae, hundreds of them, no longer than your thumbnail, with wide heads and standing out from the neck on either side. Feathery external gills like tiny fronds. They are the same shape as an axolotl, and they are doing the same job. In lake beds of this age in Europe, these larvae are preserved so finely that you can count the gill filaments, make out the outline of the skin, and see what the animal ate for its last meal still sitting in its gut. Further out, in the deeper flooded channel, something long and thin surfaces and submerges. 1.5 meters of low, crocodile-shaped animal with a narrow snout crowded with small conical teeth, Ophiocodon. Another synapsid, another cousin of yours, and one that has gone back to the water for a living. Those teeth aren't for cutting, they're for holding fish that are trying very hard to leave. And along the bank, in the soft new mud, you find a hole with the plug pushed out of it. The lungfish are up. They came out of the ground in the night. Animals that had been sealed in a mud chamber, breathing air for months, waiting on precisely this. Their tracks lead from the burrow mouth down into the flood in a wet, dragged line. You spend the whole day out on the flats, and it is, without much competition, the best day you will have here. The heat comes back by mid-morning, but the standing water keeps it civil. You eat, cautiously, badly, some soft inner tissue from a horsetail stem that is gritty with silica and tastes green and does not kill you. You watch a small captorhinid working through the insect swarm with mechanical efficiency. You see 2 Edaphosaurus back at the water, standing side by side with their sails turned toward the sun, both facing the same direction, like sheets hung to dry. And in the late afternoon, you sit on a sandbar and look at your own footprints in the fresh mud, sharp-edged and perfect, and you have the strangest thought you've had since you arrived. These may last. The mud will dry in 3 days. If the next flood lays sand gently over the top, instead of scouring it out, these prints will be sealed and pressed and turned to stone, and they will sit in a red bed in what will one day be Texas for a length of time you cannot hold in your head, and someone with a brush and a very small hammer will kneel down beside them and wonder what on earth made them. The light goes gold, then red, out beyond the flats, where the ground rises toward the burnt ridge. Something is standing at the edge of the reeds, where the water meets the dry. It has been standing there for a while, watching the flats, watching the crowd, watching the small things, moving through the shallows in their thousands. And the sail on its back is catching the last of the light. It doesn't rush. That's what makes it hard to watch. The sail-backed shape at the reed line simply lowers its head and starts walking into the shallows, and the water is only ankle deep out there, and every animal on the flats can see it coming, and most of them do nothing at all, because they have no concept of a threat that arrives at walking pace. 20 meters out, it stops, stands in 10 centimeters of warm flood water, with its belly almost touching the surface, waits. Then the head goes down and comes back up, and there is something long and dark thrashing in its jaws. An amphibian, most of a meter of it, caught in the open with nowhere to go because the deep channel is 100 meters away, and it is a very poor walker. The Dimetrodon backs out of the water, dragging its meal, jaws working, gulping it down in stages. And this is where the popular image of the animal quietly falls apart. We have spent a century drawing Dimetrodon standing over the corpse of some large, heroic land herbivore. The evidence from these floodplains points somewhere much less cinematic. The bone beds are dominated by aquatic and semi-aquatic animals, the amphibians, the eel-like hunters, the freshwater sharks. There are shark spines with bite damage. There are coprolites full of amphibian bone. The chemistry of the sediments and the sheer arithmetic of the ecosystem both suggest the same thing. This world's food web is anchored in the water, and the top predator on land makes its living by standing at the edge of it and taking whatever comes close. It is a fisherman with a sail. There's a strangeness worth sitting with there. The most famous land predator of the age before dinosaurs was, in all probability, mostly eating fish and salamander relatives out of a warm puddle. You back away along the sandbar, slowly, and it does not look up. And that night, wedged in the same dry hollow in the cut bank, with the flats singing and clicking below you, you close your eyes for what feels like a very ordinary length of time. When you open them, the air is cooler, the light is different, and the plants are wrong. 20 million years have gone. Don't try to hold on to the mechanism. It doesn't have one. Accept it the way you accept anything in this. The floodplain is gone, the conifers are gone, the sailbacks are gone, and you are lying on a low bank of dark soil, looking up through a canopy of leaves shaped like tongues. Broad, spatulate, veined leaves, packed along the branches of trees, perhaps 20 meters tall, standing in an open forest that stretches away in every direction. The light coming through them is soft and greenish, and moves constantly. This is Glossopteris, and this forest covers roughly half the world. It is a seed fern, not a true tree in the modern sense, and it dominates the southern half of Pangaea, the great landmass we call Gondwana, so completely that its fossils have been used to redraw the map of the planet. Glossopteris leaves turn up in Australia, in India, in South America, in Southern Africa, and in Antarctica, in the same beds, in the same forms. When a young German meteorologist named Alfred Wegener was assembling his case that the continents had once been joined, this leaf was one of his witnesses. Robert Falcon Scott's men were carrying fossil Glossopteris on the sledge when they died on the way back from the South Pole. The ground beneath the trees is deep in fallen leaves, which tells you something else. These forests are seasonal. They shed. Cut into one of these trunks, and you find growth rings, wide and then narrow, wide and then narrow, a record of good months and hard ones, of a climate that swings. Further south, this same forest grows inside the polar circle, in a place where the sun does not set for part of the year and does not rise for another part. And the rings from those trees are some of the strangest things in paleobotany. Enormous growth, then an abrupt stop, over and over, trees living in a light regime with no modern equivalent. You are, at a guess, somewhere in the south of the supercontinent, in ground that will one day be the Karoo of South Africa. The heat of the equatorial floodplain is gone. The air here is temperate, a little damp, and it smells of leaf litter. And there is something moving through the trees to your left at a size that makes you very glad you're sitting still. It comes out into a clearing about 30 meters off, and it is built like nothing you've met so far. 5 meters, maybe less, but heavy. A ton of animal at least. The back slopes down from high shoulders to low hips, so the whole thing looks permanently braced. The ribcage is vast. The limbs are not sprawled out sideways like Dimetrodons. They're pulled in underneath, held closer to vertical, so the body is carried clear of the ground, and the stride is longer and more efficient, and the head is small, blunt, and topped with a dome of bone that is, in some specimens, 10 centimeters thick. Moschops, a herbivore, and one of the most bizarrely reinforced skulls of the Permian. 10 centimeters of solid bone over the brain case is not defensive armor. It's in the wrong place for that. It sits where two animals would meet if they lowered their heads and drove into each other. Add the sloping spine, the reinforced neck vertebrae, the shoulders built like a buttress, and you get an animal engineered along a single line of force. From the top of the skull, through the spine to the hips, they were headbutting each other, almost certainly overmates or territory or rank, and they were doing it 50 million years before the first dinosaur, in a lineage that leads to us rather than to them. That last point matters more than it sounds. Look at the way this animal walks. Legs under the body, not out to the side. Look at the jaw. The bone at the back of the lower jaw has been shrinking. More and more of the work concentrated in a single element. A change that ends, eventually, with the tiny bones inside your own ear. Some of these animals had pits in the snout bone, where nerves and blood vessels ran to the surface, of the sort that, in living mammals, supply whiskers. We don't have hair from the Permian, but we do have skin from a related giant in Russia. Paleontologists recovered impressions of the skin itself, and it was not scaly. It was smooth and appears to have been glandular, the sort of skin that sweats and secretes. Something in this world had started building the outside of a mammal. You stay very still while the Moschops feeds. It strips leaves with a mouthful of broad, chisel-edged teeth, working steadily, unbothered. Then it lifts its head, and its ears, such as they are, go to something behind you. You turn. 30 meters away, in the shade at the tree line, there is a skull the length of your entire torso, wide, deep, heavily built, with a thickened boss of bone above the eyes, and a set of long, stabbing teeth at the front of the jaw. The body behind it is 5 meters of muscle, moving in a low crouch with the same semi-upright limbs. Ankylosaurus, half a ton, the largest land predator on Earth at this moment. Study of the internal structure of its skull, the inner ear, the balance organs, the shape of the brain cavity, suggests something people did not expect from an animal that big and that old. It was built for agility, sharp turns, fast head movement, a tracking predator, not a log with teeth. Your odds are nil, not poor, nil. Do not run, because you cannot, and because running is a signal. every predator on this planet already understands. It isn't looking at you, it's looking at the Moschops, and the Moschops has understood the situation perfectly and is already moving away through the trees at a heavy, drumming trot, and the Ankylosaurus goes after it, and the whole forest floor shakes for about 8 seconds. You sit down where you are and let your legs shake, and when the noise has gone and your breathing has settled, you notice the thing you'd been missing. The light is wrong. The sun is up, high, in a clear sky, but it's the color of an old coin, and the shadows are soft-edged and weak, and the whole forest is lit as though through smoke. Far to the north, on the other side of the world, something has begun. The sun stays like that for a long time, not dark, dimmed, a pale disk you can look at directly for a second or two without flinching, and a sky that has lost its depth, gone milky white from horizon to horizon. There is a faint haze on everything, and after a few days, you notice a fine gray dust settling on the broad leaves, thin enough that it takes the swipe of a finger to prove it's there. On the far side of the world, in ground that will become southwestern China, the crust has opened. Not a volcano. Volcanoes are small. What has started there is a flood basalt province, long fissures pouring out lava in sheets, layer over layer over layer, building a plateau of rock hundreds of meters thick across an area the size of a large country. The eruptions come in pulses over hundreds of thousands of years, and each pulse throws sulfur high into the atmosphere, where it turns into a fine reflective aerosol and stays. That's your dimmed sun. Sulfur haze cools the surface, then the sulfur washes out, and the carbon dioxide that came with it stays, and the pendulum swings the other way. Geologists call this the imation event, and it lines up in the rocks with the end of the Guadalupean, a mass extinction that most people have never heard of, sitting quietly a few million years before the famous one. It takes out reef-building organisms in the shallow seas. It empties the ocean of certain shelled plankton so thoroughly that their absence is used to date the boundary, and on land, it appears to close the file on the dinocephalians. Every animal you met in that glossopterous forest, the domed-skulled headbutter, the half-ton predator that made the ground shake, belongs to a group that does not survive this. They vanish from the fossil record more or less together, and the world spends the next few million years deciding who takes their place. You close your eyes on a gray afternoon under a hazed sun. You open them somewhere colder, on the bank of a wide, slow river. 5 million years later, the forest is gone. What's around you now is open country, low, tough vegetation, scattered stands of trees, a floodplain of red-brown silt braided with channels, and a sky that has cleared again. The air has an edge to it. You are in the north of the supercontinent this time, in ground that will one day sit near the Arctic coast of Russia, and the temperature says autumn. The first animal you see is knee-high and looks, at a distance, almost comic. It's about the length of your forearm and shin together, squat, barrel-bodied, with short, strong legs and a head that ends in a beak, an actual beak, a horny covering over toothless jaws, exactly like a turtle's, used for shearing through tough plant stems, and projecting down from the upper jaw, on either side of that beak, 2 small tusks, Dimetrodon, and there are hundreds of them. They're everywhere on this floodplain, and the ground is full of holes. Follow one down. You can't, but paleontologists have. And you find something wonderful. The burrows spiral. They corkscrew down into the sediment for a meter or more before opening into a chamber at the bottom. Casts of these helical burrows have been quarried out of the Karoo in South Africa in their thousands, and inside some of them, the animals are still there, occasionally in pairs, curled together, sealed in by a flood that came while they were home. They are Dimetrodons, the group that has inherited the plant-eating job from the dinocephalians, and they have inherited it comprehensively. Dimetrodons of every size, from this rabbit-scale burrower up to animals as big as cattle, will make up the overwhelming majority of the herbivore biomass on Earth for the rest of the Permian. In some late Permian assemblages, they account for more than 8 out of every 10 vertebrate fossils collected. They are also, like everything else here, closer kin to you than to any reptile. You walk the riverbank, and mid-morning, you come over a low rise and stop. There are perhaps 20 of them on the flats, and they are enormous, 3 meters long, tall at the shoulder, built with the same barrel drum body that says fermentation vat, but this time armored. The skin is studded with bony nodules, hundreds of small plates set into the hide, thickest along the back and flanks. The skull is knobbly and ornamented, with bony bosses over the eyes and flanges projecting from the cheeks, and the whole head looks like something carved rather than grown. A ton, easily. Scutosaurus, a parasaur, and one of the very few animals here that is not on your side of the family tree. This one belongs to a lineage that some researchers think leads, eventually, to turtles. They graze in a loose group, cropping low vegetation with rows of flat leaf-shaped teeth, and they move like animals that have nothing to be afraid of, which is nearly true. Nearly. You notice the change before you see the cause. The nearest Scutosaurus stops chewing, then the next. The whole herd goes still in a wave that runs across the flats in about 4 seconds, and every one of those heavy heads turns toward the same stand of vegetation upriver. Nothing happens for a long moment. Then something separates itself from the shadow at the edge of the reeds, and you understand what it is that these armored, ton-heavy animals are afraid of. It is low to the ground and long, 3.5 meters, perhaps more, and the skull alone is 60 centimeters, longer than your arm from elbow to fingertips. The build is entirely different from the bulky predator you met in the forest. Leaner, narrower, the limbs pulled well under the body, the head carried low and level, and when the jaws part, the front of the upper jaw carries a pair of curved sabers, 15 centimeters long, true saber teeth, serrated on the back edge, replaced continuously through life, so a broken one is a temporary inconvenience rather than a death sentence. This is Inostrancevia, a gorgonopsian, and it is the apex predator of the late Permian world. The gorgonopsians are the first great saber-toothed experiment in the history of life, and they ran it 250 million years before the saber-toothed cats. The mechanics are the same. A wide gape, teeth built for a deep initial wound rather than sustained crushing, and a bite aimed at soft tissue on a large animal that will then be allowed to weaken. There's a recent discovery attached to this animal that's worth knowing. Inostrancevia was, for a century, a Russian animal. Its fossils came from these northern beds and nowhere else. Then in 2023, Researchers described specimens from the Karoo Basin of South Africa, same genus, 10 or 11,000 kilometers away, at the far end of the supercontinent, appearing in beds right at the very end of the Permian, right after the local apex predators had disappeared. It walked the length of the world to fill an empty throne, and then, very shortly afterwards, everything died anyway. None of which helps you at all right now, because it has seen you. The herd is not the problem. The herd has already begun moving off, a slow armored shuffle downstream, and the Gorgonopsian has watched them go and made a judgment. You are smaller. You are alone. You're standing upright on open ground with no shell, no plates, no tusks, no burrow, and no speed worth discussing. Let's be honest about the odds. Since we've been keeping score, against Dimetrodon you had endurance. Against this, you have nothing. It has limbs under its body like yours. It is built for the chase rather than the ambush, and it has been solving this exact problem for 4 million years. What saves you is the river. You go into it backwards, fast, up to your waist, and then your chest, and you keep going until the current takes your feet off the bottom and turns you downstream, and you let it. It comes to the bank. It stands there, that huge low head, those two curved sabers, and it watches you go with an expression that isn't rage or hunger, but something worse, which is calculation. Then it decides the maths doesn't work and turns away toward easier arithmetic on the flats. The river carries you for a long time, hours. You crawl out somewhere in the late afternoon on a shelving bank of coarse sand, exhausted and shaking with cold. And when you stand up, you can hear something new, not insects, not wind in trees, a long, slow, rhythmic sound coming from beyond the low dunes ahead of you, rising and falling, rising and falling. You have found the sea. If you're still here with me, drifting along, thank you. If these journeys help you rest, you can quietly follow the channel so the next one finds you. Now let's continue. You come up the last dune on your hands, as much as your feet, because dry sand gives way under anything that tries to hurry on it, and then the ground levels off and the world simply ends. The sea runs out to the horizon and keeps going. It is gray-green under a high sky, moving in long, unhurried swells that break 100 meters out over something you cannot see, then reform and come in again as thin sheets across a shelving beach. The wind off it is cold and tastes of salt, and you stand there a while without moving, because after everything else, this is the first thing that has looked exactly right. And then you notice what is missing, and the ground goes out from under you all over again. There are no birds. You knew that. You have known it since the first morning. But a shoreline without gulls is a different kind of wrong from a forest without songbirds. Nothing is wheeling above the surf. Nothing stands in the shallows. Nothing picks along the tide line. There are no dark shapes hauled out on the rocks. No backs rolling offshore. No sound of breath from anything large. The entire surface of this ocean is silent. Whales are more than 200 million years away. Seals, penguins, sea turtles, further still. Above the waterline, this sea has nothing to say, and the only sound is water on sand, over and over, which is the oldest sound on this planet, and the one you will find easiest to rest to. Below the waterline, it is a different story entirely. Walk the tide line first. That is where a coast tells you what it is holding. You expect shells, and there are shells, and almost none of them are what you would call a shell. You pick one up and turn it over, and it refuses to make sense. It is roughly the size of your palm, ribbed, and the two halves are the wrong shape, not mirror images of each other the way a clam is, but one deeply curved and one nearly flat, like a saucer with a lid. And running out of the curved half are spines, dozens of them, long and hollow, and fine as knitting needles, most of them snapped off near the base. This is a brachiopod, and this beach belongs to them. They look like clams, and they are not remotely related to clams. They are a separate experiment in the same idea. Two shells, one animal, filter the water, and in this period, they are winning it comprehensively. In the shallow seas of the Permian, brachiopods are the shells. They carpet the sea floor in numbers that make modern shellfish beds look thin. The spiny ones you are holding lived lying on soft mud, using those hollow spines as stilts and anchors, the way a snowshoe spreads weight, so they could occupy ground too soft to build on. Others gave up flatness altogether and grew upward into cones, cemented in place, packed shoulder to shoulder, until the reef edge looked like a wall of small horns. If you saw a photograph, you would swear you were looking at coral. Further along, the sand is full of small pale discs, each with a hole through the center, like beads spilled from a broken necklace. There are thousands of them. Every one is a single segment from the stem of a crinoid, a sea lily, an animal built like a flower on a stalk, rooted to the bottom, feeding with a crown of feathery arms. When it dies, the stem falls apart at the joints, and the joints wash ashore forever. To give you a sense of how many there were, there are limestone beds from these seas made almost entirely of crinoid fragments, whole hillsides that are, in essence, compressed meadow. You wade out. The water is warm at the top, warmer than the air, and you go carefully because you have learned that lesson already. At about chest depth, the bottom changes from sand to structure, and you find the reef. It is not a coral reef. That is the thing to hold on to. Corals exist here. Small, solitary, horn-shaped things wedged in the crevices, and colonial ones in low mats. But they are building almost none of this. The reef is made by sponges with hard calcified skeletons, by bryozoans, growing in delicate lace fans and twisted ribbons, by crusts of calcareous algae, and by microbial mats laying down carbonate a fraction of a millimeter at a time. It is a reef assembled by things that mostly do not move and mostly do not appear in anyone's childhood picture book, and it is enormous. You can visit one. That is the part worth sitting with. In West Texas and New Mexico, there is a mountain range that is a Permian reef, lifted up and stripped bare, running for hundreds of kilometers through the desert. People climb El Capitan and stand on the reef crest and look out over what was open water. The sponges are still in it. You can put a hand on the exact surface you are treading water above right now, and the corals that are here, the horn-shaped ones, and the colonial mats, they do not survive what is coming. Both of the great coral groups of this age go out at the end of this period and never return. The corals of your world, the ones that build the barrier reef, are a later invention, a fresh start made in the Triassic by a different lineage that arrives after the wreckage and rebuilds the idea from nothing. Something moves at the edge of your vision and you turn. It hangs in mid-water about 4 meters away, a coiled shell the size of a dinner plate, with a cluster of short tentacles and 2 dark eyes underneath it. It watches you with the frank, unblinking attention of a cephalopod, adjusts something inside itself, and rises slightly without appearing to do anything at all. This is an ammonoid, and its family will be famous later, in an age it will not live to see. The suture lines on the shell, the places where the internal walls meet the outer wall, are simple here, gentle waves, rather than the fractal lacework of the ammonites of the dinosaur seas. They are the same animal at an earlier draft. Beyond it, in the deeper blue, a straight shell hangs vertically in the water like a dropped spear. That one is a nautiloid, cousin to the coiled one, and it has been doing this essentially unchanged for 200 million years already. You put your face under and open your eyes in the salt. On a slab of reef rock below you, a small dark animal is grazing. It is perhaps 3 centimeters long, armored in overlapping segments, with a rounded head shield and a fringed tail, and it moves in short, deliberate stops and starts. You know exactly what it is. Everybody knows what it is. It is a trilobite, and it is one of the last. Trilobites ran for 270 million years. They filled the seas of the early world in thousands of species. Swimmers, burrowers, blind ones, giant ones the length of your arm, ones with eyes on stalks, and ones covered in spines. By this period, all of that has narrowed to a single surviving order of small, plain, conservative grazers, hanging on in quiet corners of shallow water. This one is not the beginning of anything. It is the closing paragraph of the longest story on this planet, and it does not know that, and it is having a perfectly good afternoon. Then everything on the reef flinches at once, and you look up. Something is coming along the reef edge, and it is 4 meters long, and it is a shark, or near enough. And when it turns its head slightly, you see the thing that has kept people arguing for over a century. The lower jaw carries a spiral, not a row of teeth, a single continuous whirl of them, dozens strong, growing outward in a flat coil like a buzz saw. The oldest and smallest teeth wound tight in the center, the newest and largest standing proud at the outer edge. It never shed a tooth in its life. It simply added, and the record of every tooth it ever grew is carried in its mouth. This is Helicoprion, and for 100 years, nobody could agree where on the animal the whirl belonged. It was drawn on the snout, on the tail, on the dorsal fin, curling out of the upper lip. Then in 2013, a team put a rare specimen with jaw cartilage preserved through a CT scanner, and the answer came out plainly. The whirl sat in the lower jaw and filled it entirely, and the animal fed by rotating the coil backward as it closed, drawing soft prey in and slicing it as it went, almost certainly, judging by the wear, on things very like the coiled shell that was watching you a minute ago. The first of these whirls was described in 1899 from rock in the Perm region of Russia, and that name is worth one more moment of your attention. In 1841, a Scottish geologist named Roderick Murchison spent a season working through the folded red and gray strata of that province, recognized that they recorded a stretch of time nobody had yet accounted for, and named it after the place. Every word you have heard about this world for the last hour and a half, the Permian, comes from a Russian city on the edge of the Urals, not far from where you are floating. You swim back in slowly and lie on the warm sand and let the sun dry the salt onto your skin, and you are, for the first time since you arrived, almost content, which is when you notice the temperature of the water you have just climbed out of. It is too warm, not pleasant warm, blood warm, and warm well below the surface, where it has no business being. And far away to the northeast, in ground that will one day be called Siberia, the crust has just begun to open. You sleep on the beach, above the tide line, with your back against a shelf of reef rock that the sea cut away from itself a long time ago. When you open your eyes, the light is wrong again, and you have stopped being surprised by that. Time has moved, not 20 million years this time. Something smaller, a few 100,000, the length of a paragraph, but you can read it in the coast. The dune field behind you has walked inland. The tide line sits further up the beach, and the air, when you take your first breath of it, is thick and close and unpleasantly warm, the way a room feels when the window has been shut for a week. The sky has that milky quality you saw once before in the Glossopteris forest, when the sun turned the color of an old coin. It is worse now. The sun is a pale disk with no edge to it, and the horizon over the water has no line at all. Sea and sky simply blur into one another, somewhere out there, in a haze that never lifts. Far to the northeast, underground that will one day be called Siberia, something has started that will not stop for the better part of 1,000,000 years. It began the way the last one did, a plume of hot rock rising slowly through the mantle, reaching the base of the crust, spreading out beneath it like water hitting a ceiling. The crust stretched, thinned, and split, and lava came up through the fissures in sheets. Not from a mountain. There is no cone, no crater, nothing you could photograph and call a volcano. There are long cracks in the ground, kilometers of them, running molten. The total volume of what comes out is difficult to hold in the head. The estimates argue, as good estimates do, but they run somewhere between 3 and 7 million cubic kilometers of basalt, enough to bury a continent. The lava fields it builds cover an area comparable to the whole of Western Europe, and the layers stack, flow on flow on flow, until the pile is kilometers thick. You can still stand on it. The Putorana Plateau in the Russian Arctic is what is left after 250 million years of weather has done its best. But the lava is not the problem. The problem is what the lava came up through. Underneath that part of the world there is a basin filled with sediment, and that sediment is loaded with coal and with organic-rich shale and with thick beds of salt and evaporate left behind by ancient seas. Magma pushed sideways into those layers and cooked them in place. Not burned, cooked, at depth, under pressure, over an area the size of a country. Coal that had been locked away since the great forests of the Carboniferous was heated until it gave up its carbon. Salt beds were baked until they released halogen gases, the kind that attack ozone. Organic shales released methane. Geologists have found the vents, pipes and craters punched up through the sediment, where the pressurized gas broke out to the surface, hundreds of them, and the rock inside them is a mess of burnt and altered coal. The eruptions themselves would have been survivable. What the eruptions set fire to underground was not. So this is what you are breathing. Carbon dioxide, kinoi, rising through the atmosphere for a period longer than our species has existed, faster than the ocean and the rocks can absorb it, and carbon warms. The chemistry does not negotiate. Oxygen isotopes measured from the tiny phosphate teeth of an eel-like animal called a conodont, the most reliable thermometer we have for this. Interval, record tropical sea surface, temperatures climbing past 35 degrees, and in the worst of it, past 40. That is bathwater. At the top of an open ocean, On land, near the equator, the models produce conditions in which a large animal simply cannot shed heat during the day, no matter what it does or where it stands. There is a stretch of the tropics in the aftermath of this event where the fossil record of four-legged animals essentially stops and stays stopped for millions of years, not because they were killed there, because nothing could live there. You feel a version of it that afternoon, not the worst of it. You are on a coast in the higher latitudes, and the sea still buys you something, but you sit in the thin shade of a dying conifer with your back to the trunk and your breath going shallow, and the sweat runs off you without cooling anything, and you understand for the first time that the single advantage you brought into this world, your skin, your sweat glands, your ability to keep walking when other things have to stop, has just been quietly taken off the table. The sea goes first, and you can watch it go. Warm water holds less dissolved oxygen than cold water. That is a plain physical fact, and it is true in a glass on a table and true across an ocean. As the surface heats, the ocean stops turning over properly. The deep water stops being refreshed, and oxygen drains out of it from the bottom up. In the rocks of this interval, all over the world, the sediments change color. Well-oxygenated seafloor leaves pale, churned, burrowed limestone, full of the tracks of animals moving through the mud. What replaces it is black, finely laminated shale, undisturbed, with no burrows in it at all, because there was nothing left down there to burrow. And in some of those black shales there are chemical fossils, molecules from a particular group of bacteria that photosynthesize using hydrogen sulfide instead of water, and which require both sunlight and sulfide at the same time. For those molecules to be in that rock, the poisoned water must have come all the way up into the sunlit zone. You find out what that means one morning at the tide line. There is a smell coming off the water, faint then not faint. Rotten eggs. The shallows have gone slightly milky, and along the beach, in a line that runs as far as you can see in both directions, the sea has returned what it can no longer keep. Brachiopods by the thousand, most of them small and thin-walled, crinoid stems, the lace bryozoans broken, a coiled ammonoid shell, cracked open and empty. The reef is still there. It is simply not doing anything anymore. The chemistry has a second edge to it, and it works on shells. Dissolve enough carbon dioxide into seawater, and the water turns very slightly more acidic and calcium carbonate. The material every shell and reef and coral skeleton in this ocean is built from becomes harder to precipitate and easier to dissolve. In the rock record from the last stage of this period, there is a striking pattern. The animals that struggle most are precisely the ones that build heavy carbonate skeletons and have no real ability to control their internal chemistry. Brachiopods, corals, crinoids, bryozoans, the great sponge-built reefs. Reef structures vanish from the geological record almost entirely and do not properly return for something like 10 million years. The numbers, when you finally state them, are almost too large to be useful. Estimates for marine species loss at the end of this period run from around 80% to over 90%. On land, roughly 7 in 10 families of four-legged animals disappear. It is the most severe extinction event in the history of complex life, before or since. Worse than the asteroid, worse than anything the planet has done since. Nothing else comes close. On land, you can watch a smaller, stranger version of the same thing. pollen and spores from this interval, recovered from sediments in several parts of the world, include an unusual number of malformed grains, spores that fail to separate properly, pollen with the wrong number of sacs. The suggested explanation is ultraviolet damage from an ozone layer thinned by all those halogen gases baked out of the Siberian salt. Plants under stress, reproducing badly, generation after generation, and in the rock immediately above, in many places, there is a sharp spike in fungal and algal remains, the signature of a landscape with an enormous amount of dead vegetation lying on it and very little living vegetation left standing. You walk the beach a last time in the strange brown light, and about halfway along, you crouch down over something in the wet sand. It is 3 centimeters long, armored in overlapping segments, with a rounded head shield and a fringed tail, and it is lying on its back, and it is not moving. Somewhere in this interval, on some shoreline, there was the last one, 270 million years of the most successful body plan the oceans ever produced, and it ended quietly in shallow water without an audience. You put it back in the sea, which does nothing at all, and you keep walking, and then, over the following weeks, the thing you notice most is not the dying, it is how quiet it gets. The quiet is not what you expected. You had assumed that a world coming apart would be loud, and for a while it was. The wind off the hot sea, the smell, the sound of a coastline rearranging itself. But that passes. What settles in afterwards is an absence so complete that it takes you days to name it. The insects have stopped. That low, dry, ticking hum that has been underneath every hour of this journey, the one you noticed on your very first morning and then forgot about entirely. The way you forget the sound of a refrigerator is gone. Not quieter, gone. You sit at dusk on a bank of gray silt and hear wind and water and your own breathing and nothing else at all. And you realize that the Permian is the only period in the history of the planet after which anyone has had to argue about whether insects suffered a mass extinction, because it is the only place in the record where the insects clearly and unmistakably do. You close your eyes on that bank, and before you open them, that time has moved again. It is cooler. Not cool, cooler. You are lying on cracked mudstone under an open sky, and there is a low green haze of vegetation across the ground in front of you, and you sit up slowly and take stock of a world about 1 million years further on. The first thing is the sky. It is clear, ordinary blue, with ordinary clouds, and a sun with a hard, bright edge to it that you can no longer look at directly. Whatever was hanging in the air has finally rained out. The second thing is that the landscape is low. There is vegetation everywhere, and none of it is tall. Ferns in great spreading carpets, small upright plants like green bottle brushes, standing knee-high in dense stands across the flats. A lycopod called Pleuromeia, a relative of the enormous scaled trees of the coal forests, reduced now to something you could mow. There are no conifer ridges. There are no seed fern forests. There is nothing you would describe as woodland in any direction. And when you walk for an hour, that does not change. The rocks record this in the simplest way imaginable. Somewhere in the world, in every geological period, something is dying in a swamp, being buried before it can rot, and slowly turning into coal. It is one of the most reliable processes on the planet, and for roughly 10 million years after this boundary, Across every continent, there is none, no coal anywhere. Geologists call it the coal gap, and what it means is that for 10 million years, the Earth did not have a single peat-forming wetland ecosystem worth the name. There is a reef gap alongside it. For much the same span, there is a gap in the deep-sea cherts formed by silica-shelled plankton. The planet did not just lose species, it temporarily lost the ability to do several things it had been doing continuously for hundreds of millions of years. The third thing you notice is the animal. There is one moving through the ferns about 40 meters away, and it is roughly the size of a large dog, barrel-bodied, short-legged, with a blunt-beaked head and two small tusks projecting downward from the upper jaw. You recognize the family instantly. You watched their small cousins, burrowing on the Russian floodplain. This is a Dimetrodon. Then you see another one, and then, when you climb a low rise and look properly, you see that the flats in front of you hold perhaps 200 of them, spread out, cropping the fern beds, moving slowly, entirely untroubled. And in the hours that follow, you will see almost nothing else. This is Lystrosaurus, and in the beds, immediately above the boundary in the Karoo of South Africa, it accounts for something in the region of 9 out of every 10 vertebrate fossils collected. Not 9 out of 10 individuals of the herbivores, 9 out of 10 animals with a backbone, of any kind, doing any job. There is a word for this in paleontology, a disaster taxon. It is what a food web looks like when almost everything has been removed, and one survivor with broad tastes and no competitors inherits an entire continent. Why this one specifically is not fully settled. It burrowed, which helps enormously when the surface is lethal. It was a generalist that could crop tough, low, poor quality vegetation, which is all there was. It seems to have grown fast and bred young, and there is evidence from bone microstructure that in the aftermath these animals were living dramatically shorter lives than their ancestors, reaching breeding age quickly and dying early, generation after generation, in a world that killed them before they could get old. You watch them for a long time, and it should be a cheerful sight, 200 animals feeding peacefully in the sun. And it isn't quite, and it takes you a while to work out why. It is because they are all the same. Everything else you have seen on this journey came with a cast. The floodplain had sailbacks and amphibians and sharks and burrowing fish and swarming insects and the little sharp-toothed things in the horsetails. The Glossopteris forest had the headbutter and the predator that hunted it. Even the dunes had tracks. Here there is a herd and ferns and a very great deal of empty ground. Look closer and there is more. There always is. Down among the ferns, you find something small and quick, no bigger than a house cat, low to the ground, with a long body and limbs tucked properly underneath it. When it stops and turns its head, you see a short snout, differentiated teeth, and along the muzzle, in the bone itself, a scatter of small pits where nerves and blood vessels ran to the surface. In every living mammal, pits like that supply whiskers. This is a cynodont, and it is very close to your own line. It burrows. It is small, which in this world is an advantage rather than a limitation, and it is part of a broad pattern in these beds that has its own name. The Lilliput effect. Across the boundary, in group after group, on land and in the sea, body sizes crash. Brachiopods that were palm-sized become fingernail-sized. Large animals disappear disproportionately for a long stretch afterwards. Being big is simply a bad strategy. There is one thing found in these rocks that is worth knowing, and it is not about survival statistics at all. In 2013, researchers CT scanned a burrow cast from the Karoo from the earliest Triassic. Inside it, curled up, was one of these small cynodonts, and curled up beside it, sharing the chamber, was a temnospondyle, an amphibian, an animal from a completely different branch of life, with a badly broken and partly healed set of ribs. The burrow was flooded and sealed with both of them inside. The cynodont appears to have been in a torpid state. The injured amphibian seems simply to have come in and to have been allowed to stay. Nobody knows what that means. It may mean nothing. 2 animals, 1 shelter, no energy to spare for an argument, but it is a real object in a museum, and you can look at it, and what it shows is 2 small survivors of the worst thing that ever happened to this planet, lying together in the dark, waiting out the water. It takes a long time to come back. That is the part that is genuinely difficult to feel, because the numbers are so far outside anything a person can hold. The recovery is not a season or a century. Ecosystems with complex food webs, multiple predator levels, large herbivores, forests, reefs do not reassemble for something in the order of 5 to 10 million years, and the delay appears to be partly because the climate would not stay still. The carbon isotope record swings violently through the early Triassic, back and forth for millions of years, and each swing seems to correspond to another pulse of heat, another setback, another clearing of the board, and then, eventually, it works. The ferns give way to conifers again. Reefs are rebuilt from scratch by a group of corals that did not exist before and has been building them ever since. The seas refill. The small burrowing cynodonts in the ferns in front of you become, in time, animals with fur and warm blood and milk, and every one of the traits you woke up wearing on the first morning, and another lineage entirely, one you have barely met, small, upright, fast-growing archosaurs, currently unremarkable and rare, inherits the empty large animal jobs and becomes the crocodiles and the pterosaurs. And about 20 million years from where you are standing, the first dinosaur, none of which was owed to anyone. That is the thing this landscape actually says, standing on it in the sun, watching 200 identical animals eat ferns. Not that life is fragile. It clearly isn't. It got through this. Not that life is unbreakable either. Most of it broke. Something less tidy than that, and harder to put down. The world you know is not the world that was always going to happen. It is what got through, and then what got through after that, and the ferns and the burrows, and the small animal with whiskers, watching you from the undergrowth, are the whole reason there is anyone here to wonder about it. You lie down that night on warm mudstone, under a sky that has finally cleared, in a world that is quiet in a different way than before, not emptied, just early, and you already know, without being told, that this is the last time you are going to close your eyes here. There is no last morning exactly. There is just a night that goes on a little longer than the others. You lie on the warm mudstone with your hands behind your head, and you do not sleep because you have decided not to, and above you, the sky is doing the thing it has done every night since you arrived, and which you will never see again once you leave. The Milky Way comes across it like something spilled, bright enough to throw the faintest shadow, dark lanes of dust cutting through it in shapes you could trace with a finger, and not one constellation you have ever learned, because the sun has been traveling all this time, carrying you around a corner of the galaxy that will not come back around for 250 million years. You go back through it slowly, the way you would go back through a long journey on the last night of it. The red mud, first, fine and dry as brick dust, cracking off your arm in flakes, staining your skin rust orange. You remember thinking that the stain would be with you for a while. It was the first breath. Too easy, a glass that wouldn't stop pouring, the silence where the birds should have been, and how long it took you to work out what you were listening to. Nothing calling out to anything, no dawn chorus. In a world that had dawns for 4 billion years before anyone thought to sing at one, the flat eye of a small animal 3 meters away, looking at you side on, with no category to put you in. The sail across the river, glowing dull rose, where the morning light came through the membrane, with the branching lines of blood vessels, dark inside it like veins in a leaf held up to a window. The oldest argument in paleontology, standing in the shallows, declining to explain itself. The four-winged shadow that crossed the water and stopped your brain for a second. The largest insect there has ever been, not of its age, of all of them, moving through an empty sky that belonged entirely to it and to nothing else, for a little while longer. The storm, the line on the horizon, and the 2 hours of watching it come, and every animal at the water lifting its head at once, the temperature dropping 15 degrees in 90 seconds, the rain coming down in a solid gray wall, and the ground refusing to take any of it, and afterwards, under the overhang, cold and soaked, and oddly not unhappy, the smell, wet earth, that warm, mineral green smell that rises when rain hits dry ground, made by soil bacteria older than anything with a spine, thrown into the air by raindrops striking dust, unchanged across 290 million years, of everything in that entire world, the sky, the silence, the animals, the light. That was the one thing that was exactly, precisely as you already knew it. And then the flats, the morning after, green overnight, with the insects rising in clouds when you walked, and the griffin flies working the swarm, and the whole floodplain breeding at once because it had perhaps 3 weeks to do it in. You sat on a sandbar that afternoon and looked at your own footprints in the fresh mud and had a thought you couldn't quite let go of, that if the next flood laid sand gently over the top, instead of scouring it out, they might last, that they would sit in a red bed in what will one day be Texas for a length of time you cannot hold in your head, and that someone with a brush and a very small hammer would eventually kneel down beside them and wonder what on earth made them. That thought is the closest thing this journey has to a conclusion, and it is worth leaving where it is, without tidying it up, because that is what a fossil is, not a record that was kept, an accident that survived. Everything you saw came to you that way. The lungfish curled in its burrow, sealed in mid-weight, its nap running 290 million years, past the point where it stopped being a nap. The 11 minutes of rain preserved as pockmarks in a mud surface that dried before the next flood covered it, the healed fractures in a sail, the broken and regrown horn tips of an animal shaped like a boomerang, which tells you that something tried more than once and gave up. The two survivors curled together in a flooded burrow in the dark, one of them injured, both of them small enough to still be here in the morning. None of that was written down. It was simply not destroyed and then found. The trilobite on the reef, comes back to you last, 3 centimeters long, grazing in its short, deliberate stops and starts, having a perfectly good afternoon at the end of the longest story this planet ever told. You put it back in the sea, and the sea did nothing at all. You don't remember deciding to close your eyes. There is warmth on your face, and the smell of wet earth and resin, and a sound you can't place because nothing in your life has ever made it. And then there is a sound you can place, a low hum from somewhere behind a wall, a refrigerator turning itself over in an empty kitchen, somewhere down the hall, thin blue light from a screen that was left on, perhaps a car out on a road, perhaps rain on a window, which is the sound this planet has been making since long before there was anything to hear it. Your own room, the weight of your own blanket, air with 21% oxygen in it, which will be perfectly sufficient, and a day that is 24 hours long, an hour and a half slower than the one you have just come back from. Outside, at some point before you wake properly, birds will start. They will be doing it because a lineage of small feathered animals came through a different catastrophe a long way further down the line, and because sound turned out to be useful, and because somewhere in the middle of all of it, a warm night and an empty sky made it worth calling out to something. It took a while to get here. Rest well. And if you'd like another, the channel will be waiting.